Saturday the 23rd of January, and today in Northamptonshire we're getting the first significant snow of the winter. There's a pair of carrion crow in the ash tree. I wonder if it's the pair that nested in the tree last year. We've just had a delivery of bird food. It's general mixed seed and also Niger seed. I've made up a mixture of nuts, fruit and seed for the bird table, and also some cheese for fat. There's blue sky above, so it looks like the snow is over, and I watch this pair of collared dove up in the ash tree, and despite the cold it looks like their mind is on springtime and making baby collared doves. As expected, it's not long before the starlings discover the newly replenished feeders. This female blackbird bathes in the pond. It's late afternoon now, and the sun is beginning to set, and there's no trace of the snow that fell earlier. The snow may have gone for now, but it's going to be a cold night. The forecast is for overnight temperatures of -5. After a cold night, the birds are up at first light, and the first visitors to my feeding station are Dunnock and this robin, who makes regular visits to the table. It looks like it has a preference for the cheese I put out. A cheese such as mild grated cheddar isn't harmful to the birds and can be a good source of fat, and it can be digested easily. But never put out milk for the birds, as they're unable to digest this, and it can cause acute stomach upset or death. It's mid-morning and the second wave of snow has arrived. The forecast is for continuous snow throughout the day. The pond is frozen solid, and so is the bird bath, and the colony of house sparrows take refuge in the hedges. It's Sunday lunchtime, and the snow gets heavier all the time, and it isn't long before the garden is covered in a deep layer of white. Gulls use the surrounding television aerials as handy perches. It looks like mainly black-headed and common. The starlings tend to come into the ash tree first, and then swoop down into the pear tree, and then down onto the feeders to begin their feast. And some obviously prefer the contents of the table. And what an impressive manoeuvre from the male blackbird. And now the house sparrows venture out to feed. The male blackbird prefers to take a beakful of apple from the table and then retires to shelter at the base of the pear tree to finish its meal. The house sparrows will momentarily venture out to feed and then quickly return to the safety of the hedge. I know I've mentioned it several times before, but what a striking bird the starling is. And it has a really interesting way of feeding. It stabs with its beak closed and then suddenly opens it, as you can see by the freeze frame here. The action is designed for opening up holes when feeding on soft ground. The male blackbird continues to shelter at the base of the pear tree, its yellow ringed eye and stunning yellow beak clearly visible, and the busy chatter of the colony of house sparrows can be clearly heard as they shelter in the surrounding hedges. It's around about 8 PM now, and the snow is still falling heavily. The next morning dawns bright and cold. The snow has stopped, but it's a real winter wonderland. The rising sun paints the world in a pinkish orange glow, and the stunning male blackbird watches me from the depths of the pear tree. And a lone starling sings way up in the top of the ash, and above me in the cloudless blue sky a red kite soars. I take my morning exercise, and my plan is to walk the mile or so to Belton Park to try and film some deer. On the way, looking out over the Ise Valley affords wonderful views of the village of Walkton, and there's nothing like the sound of a singing robin to lift your spirits. And at last I could look out across the rolling parkland of Belton Park, with the stately home of Belton House. There are some deer on view, but these are a long way off. They look like seeker deer. This sunken wall is called a ha-ha and isn't visible from the great house when looking out across the parkland. And here's more deer. The ones with the lighter coats are definitely Pear David's deer, one of the 3 species that can be found in the park. The darker species look like seeker. I'll reach the footpath sign, and here there's a stile that you can stand on to look over the park wall. In less restricted times, parts of the park are open to the public, but not this part. From the village of Weekley, just next to the church, there is a footpath that leads along the wall to this point. And here is our second view of Belton House, one of the seats of the Dukes of Buccleuch. My eye is drawn to a bird of prey sitting in the uppermost branches of a tree. It's a red kite, distinguishable by its forked tail. More deer are moving way out in the park. These look like seeker. And another small group of seeker deer feed from the feeding trough. The third species of deer in the park is the fallow, and I find this small group of does sheltering under the tree near the wall. They're the dark melanistic variety. The rut was back in the autumn, and many of these does may carry young. And now I think it's about time I headed back home. While I was out, we had another delivery of bird food. We have a seed block, suet nuggets, and last but definitely not least, fat balls. And now there's certainly a good selection of bird food out there. The starlings patiently wait for me to go back indoors before descending to the feeders. I'm happy to see the starlings and sparrows visit the feeders, but in the last few years I have noticed a decline in the range of species that visit the garden. We still get plenty of blue tit and great tit, but no cold tit, chaffinch or greenfinch, so let's hope that changes soon. Well, with the slow thaw setting in, that brings me to the end of this winter diary, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.